view of New York back in the 17th and 18th century, and this really was, Governor's Island was the center of the world. Now, a more recent view, this is the iconic subway map, which only recently was replaced, and of course, if you look very hard, you will not see Governor's Island. One of the obvious things is that Governor's Island is not accessible by subway or taxi, and one of the things that I discovered when I took this job 4 years ago was how hard it is to convince anyone to do anything in a place that you can't get to by subway or taxi in New York. I'm happy to report, actually, if you go to the subway map after this conference, you will see Governor's Island, although we have not yet built a tunnel. Governor's Island was this beautiful, bucolic place, and then in 1905, it was actually doubled in size by the military. And this is sort of the became the industrial southern half of the island, using landfill actually from the subway that is running under our feet. And for some quick facts, the island is 172 acres. The green half is the landfill, the red is historic, and in the middle of it is a national monument. So for those of you who haven't been, just want to lay out those facts for you. And this is what it looks like today. But the important thing to remember is this image, because it's shaped like an ice cream cone. That is important. Ice cream is actually one of the seminal experiences on Governor's Island now, but that is our image. So the theme of this conference is, of course, inspiration, experimentation, and collaboration. So 4 or 5 years ago, even going back 10 years, the inspirations for Governor's Island all came from these historic images. And even people had fantasies that this would be Colonial Williamsburg for New York. And I don't know how many of you were dragged by your parents at the age of 11 to Colonial Williamsburg and have a picture somewhere in your family archives. But Colonial Williamsburg is not generally a place that inspires the rest of us to go back. And so we kind of abandoned that as an inspiration. What we discovered was that actually what inspires people on Governor's Island and is inspiring the reactivation of Governor's Island is not so much what's on the island, but what you see from the island. And one of the hard things is that if I would tell people 3 or 4 years ago that you can see the Statue of Liberty, well, how many people here have been to the Statue of Liberty since they were 12 years old? Thank you. That's actually a decent representation. But people would say, well, who cares about that? Well, actually, you know, when you come to Governor's Island and you stand on the shoreline and you look at it, you go, that is pretty awesome. But that is what inspired us. But really, the inspiration for Governor's Island and what we've done to experiment in the last 4 years is something else. How many people have seen the movie Dirty Dancing? Thank you. Is set in the Catskills, and what do you do in the Catskills? You are on summer vacation. And so the inspiration for us was the notion of summer vacation with irony. And so everything that you do on Governor's Island really comes from that. And so we have experimented, and our sort of official process is a little bit like throwing spaghetti up at a wall, and that has yielded a bunch of different ideas. So one of the great icons of summer vacation in America is, of course, hammocks. We're the first place where you can actually enjoy a hammock in a public space. Adirondack chairs. Sitting in that famous view of the statue is actually way better in an Adirondack chair than it is anything else. And again, probably the only public space where you can have Adirondack chairs. But there's a lot more to summer vacation than just sitting enjoying the view. Badminton, this is one of our programs this year. People playing badminton in a public space. And all of these things are experiments. When we said, we'd like to let adults go on swings. Now that doesn't seem like a lot of rocket science. When we put these swings out there for the first month, grown-ups would stop and they would say, can we go there? Because of course there's nowhere else. If you try to go in a swing in a New York City playground, you will get the evil eye from any mother and even from a child. We did it one better this year. This is our latest experiment, trapeze. What I love about this is people pay to go to trapeze school, and the rest of us watch for free. If I could come up with 10 more experiments like this, where people are paying to be the entertainment for the rest of us, we will be in very good shape. So this is the New York Trapeze School on Governor's Island. I don't know who that is. And this is not an experiment that I personally have participated in because I have a very severe fear of heights. Then, of course, the sort of paradigmatic experiment and the symbol of Governor's Island is our artist-designed miniature golf. Now, 4 years ago, when I had the idea to do this, I called up a lot of people in the art world in New York, which tends to be very snotty, and most people who I knew, so it wasn't like I was a stranger, they said, that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard. Within literally 22 minutes of people installing, this is actually one of our historic holes, Venus flytrap. 3-year-olds were playing, and one of the great things about miniature golf is that we're all equal. So the people in this room are actually not going to be as good as the 4-year-olds, but they actually don't think it's beneath them to play next to a hole where there are a bunch of 4-year-olds actually racing through Venus flytrap, which happens to be a very difficult one. But that's sort of our accessible culture, and then we have, of course, Prince Harry playing polo. One of our requirements was that it be free. And we were talking to Veuve Clicquot, very fancy, I don't know if they're a sponsor here, and we said, it's really going to be more exciting on the public side. And we got 10,000 people, and of course, when Bill Cunningham came out to do a photo spread, he did not take pictures of celebrities, he took pictures of New Yorkers who were there for free, but dressed in incredible hats and dresses and drinking lots of champagne. This is sort of our high culture. And then, of course, a little more accessible, the Vendy Awards, my favorite day on the island when I served as a judge. These are all experiments. So a lot of these things never happened before in New York. The Vendy Awards happens to be in its 6th year, but every year we try something new. Punk Island, one of our signature events, not to be confused with Army reenactments. Those happen on the same weekend, by the way. There was a little concern about what that would mean, but everyone gets along. We have some great pictures of the Mohawk guys shaking hands with the Army recruiters, which I did bring with me. And then, of course, we have zombies. These zombies were featured in a film last year on Governor's Island, produced by the Bruce High Quality Foundation. If you're not familiar with them, they're a group of artists all named Bruce. And this was shot in our movie theater and then projected. So there was a little conflict after the zombies when they tried to take over the dance floor of the Jazz Age lawn party and force them to play Thriller. This was before Michael Jackson died. But in any event, we resolved that conflict, one of my favorite incident reports. This is a place for grown-ups to play, for children to play, for everyone to experiment, whether you're here to see Panda Bear, Grizzly Bear, or as I mentioned, Jazz Age Lawn Party, everyone is experimenting on this island. Whether you're eating food slowly, this is actually an art project, or if you were lucky enough to be here a couple weekends ago for Pig Island, 30 pigs, 20 chefs, 1,500 people. These are all experiments of art, art for everyone, and dancing, the New Island Festival, and children playing. We also believe that in addition to children, grown-ups should create things as well. And our favorite experiment, the imagined history of Governor's Island, the archaeological dig. These artists still get email from people asking about their progress on discovering the archaeology of Goverthing, a lost town in the middle of New York Harbor. And one of our favorite MP3 events with this Queen Mary behind us. And this, I think, this is one of my favorite images. This just embodies Governor's Island. This is an anatomically correct image. We did actually move this sculpture when President Bush came to visit, but other than that, it didn't bother us at all. Then finally, to talk about collaboration, I thought I would end with 3 stories. The first about Spider-Man. Spider-Man actually took over Governor's Island in a comic book series, and so we actually called Spider-Man, or actually the illustrator of Spider-Man, to ask if he would come do a reading. And they were so amazed by this that I would actually write to them that they published the letter in Marvel Comics. And then Spider-Man's illustrator and author came to Governor's Island to talk about the creation of their 2-part episode. I think it's called an issue. I'm sorry, I'm not a comic book person. So collaboration in this case just meant we found something, somebody else did something creative, and we invited the conversation to continue on Governor's Island. Pirates is one of my favorite stories. I got an email about 3 weekends ago, and it said, pirates are on the ferry. And I actually, for a moment, thought pirates were on the ferry. Well, many of the events that I showed you are events that, of course, we worked with groups. They filled out permits, they got budgets, and then there's, of course, the pirate wedding on Governor's Island. The greatest thing about this is that the groom's side of the family knew it was a pirate wedding, but not the bride's side of the family. So For those of you who don't read the vows column in the New York Times, where this was featured, this was pirates taking over a wedding on Governor's Island about 3 weeks ago. And to me, that's just the greatest thing about collaboration. We didn't do a thing. We're just a welcoming place. And finally, I'll end with unicycles. That's Chris and Allie. They got married on Governor's Island. I introduced myself to them. So about a year ago, I read an article in the Times, and there was a guy named Keith Nelson from the Bindlestiff Family Circus, and he was writing, and he said, New York should have a boulevard for unicycles. So I had no idea who this guy was, but I looked him up on the internet, and I emailed him, and I said, well, I can't do that, but I do have an island, and we'd like some unicycles. And from that came the New York Unicycle Festival, which took place in September. You would not believe how many unicyclists there are in New York, of all ages, playing unicycle hockey. And one of them includes my husband, who got back on a unicycle after a long time. There he is. He doesn't know that he's in this presentation. But my favorite person was the Can Man. And the greatest thing about Governor's Island is that the Can Man came along, and he was waving, but we already had a can man on Governor's Island because we had an artist doing a project with 30,000 cans. So that's Governor's Island. It's a place where collaboration happens in ways that even we couldn't imagine, where we invite everyone to experiment, and where we're really inspired, sadly, by the soundtrack for Dirty Dancing, which I'm very disappointed did not play in my presentation. But I encourage you all to go listen to that later and think about how you can come back in 2011 and join us in our great experiment. Thank you.